Hello, Year 11. It's Mrs. Crowhurst again for our third lesson on creative writing. Today we're going to be looking at using devices. So to start, for the Do It Now, can you just have a look at the devices on the left here and match them to the correct definition? I know you've probably done this hundreds of times in secondary school and English lessons, but this is really important that you have a clear understanding of each device and what it is before we move on to using them in our own writing. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, pause the video, and then we'll go over the answers. Okay, so obviously pause the video if you need some extra time. So alliteration is D. So two or more words beginning with the same letter or sound. So they could be right next to each other in a sentence, or they could be kind of spaced out, but usually within the same sentence, and that's how they have the effect. Number two, simile. Simile is C. So comparing two things using like or as, you need one of those words like or as for it to be a simile. Number three, metaphor. That is E. So when one thing is directly described as something else, not using like or as. And then four is personification. That's B. So when an object or a non-living thing is described with human actions or emotions. And then lastly, we have an oxymoron, and that is A. So words with opposite or contrasting meanings when they're used close together or right next to each other. And then the challenge, well done for doing that. Obviously, there are lots of devices, things like rhetorical questions, rule of three, but the ones we're looking at today are just some of the key ones that are really useful in descriptive writing. So, what are we learning about? We'll be learning about how to use a range of devices in our descriptive writing. Why are we doing this? Well, like we've been doing all week, we are focusing on Language Paper 1, Section B, where you have to write a description, and you will be marked as well as on how you use sentences and how you plan out the structure of your description. You'll be marked on using language for effect, and what that means is using devices. And how are we going to be doing that? Well, in this lesson, we'll be looking at some key devices, learning how to use them effectively in our writing. Let's just have a look at the mark scheme. So what we're doing each lesson is trying to pick out the different bullet points, because there are lots of them that the examiners have to look at and use when we are marking your work. But these ones link to the use of devices. So if you notice up here, for grades 4 and above, you have to, choose a range of vocabulary, so the words you choose are important, and also use a range of linguistic devices, and that means, devices like the ones we just looked at in the Do It Now. And for the higher grades, grade 7 plus, they want a really extensive and ambitious use of vocabulary, so don't just choose the most obvious words, really try to carefully think about each word you choose. And then sustained crafting of linguistic devices, so lots of devices will be used, and they will be crafted, and the sentences will be manipulated to create a really powerful atmosphere and show some deeper meaning for the reader. And the word sustained means those devices aren't just used well in one paragraph, they're used well in every paragraph. So for our first task, let's just look at this paragraph below and complete the task. So this is a very descriptive paragraph describing a winter scene. And what I'd like you to do is just take a few minutes to pick out some different devices in this paragraph to really look at how they can be used in a description. And for the challenge, explain the effect of each device you find. How does it add detail, or what deeper meaning does it convey about this winter landscape? So pause the video and complete those tasks, and then we'll go over some ideas. Okay, so we're just going to go through some of the devices that you may have found in the paragraph. So 3 powerful words that I picked out, there are lots of them here, are snatching, I also really liked Cascaded, and then another one was Shroud. So they're all different types of words, but I thought they were quite effective because they created a more detailed image in my mind of exactly what this landscape was like, and gave a deeper meaning, very dark meaning, but a deeper meaning to it rather than just, this is a winter scene, let's just describe the obvious things about it. Number two, an example of alliteration. Well, this one was kind of tough to find. So down here, I found a lot of S sounds, a lot of words beginning with an S. They're not immediately next to each other, but they're definitely placed close together in this sentence. Alliteration that uses S's can also be called sibilance. And the effect of this, it definitely draws your attention to those words. It also creates this kind of eerie, whispering S sound if you read it out loud, which almost makes the snow seem quite sneaky and stealthy in a way, that it's kind of coming in and taking over this scene. And snow is supposed to be something that's quite positive. We usually view it as something good, but this is giving it kind of an eerie, stealthy quality. Number three, a simile. So we have a simile down here near the inn. So saying that the snow kind of covers the earth like a sheet over a dead body. That's a pretty dark simile, but it just links to the meaning of the whole paragraph, where it's trying to describe this winter scene is bringing death to nature, really. Number four, an example of personification. There's lots of personification. Actually, that is the device that this writer seems to use the most. So I like up here, this sentence up here, where they've actually kind of used a repetitive list as well, where they say, groaning through the crippled trees, snatching away at the brown leaves, and robbing nature of the last signs of dying life. All of that kind of makes the wind seem as if it's a person, almost an invader or a thief coming into the natural landscape and taking away and kind of punishing the trees and the earth and robbing nature of life. So I liked that. Turned the wind into something evil. And then a metaphor. Let's see. It's hard to kind of distinguish here a lot because they use so much personification. It could be considered personification or a metaphor. But I like the way they describe deep wrinkles in the ground. So maybe the cracks in the ground, or where it's gone so dry and cold that they look like wrinkles, and describing them as stretching across the land, almost like a really old person's face. That's what I imagined. And then an oxymoron. This is something smaller that you have to look closer to pick out. So I found one here with dying life. Life is supposed to be linked to being alive. However, this is dying life, which has a deeper meaning, because I think the writer is trying to show us that this landscape that maybe once was full of life in the spring and summer and even a bit in the autumn is slowly dying, and that's what winter does. It kind of pulls the life out of the earth and takes it away for a while, which is pretty depressing, actually. And then lastly, can you find a lexical set? What is it? So if you remember from other lessons in English, a lexical set is where the writers used a set of words linked to one idea to describe something else. So although it's describing a winter scene, they seem to use a lot of words linked to getting old. So we have wrinkles, we have barren, crippled, and then we also have a lot of words linked to death. So we have dying, shroud, and then also dead body, things like that. So yeah, I found out two lexical sets, one linked to getting old and one linked to dying. Okay, so for our next task, it's your turn to have a go at using some of these devices. And what we have is 4 sentences. They're all pretty basic, and they are all just telling the reader about things in a scene. In this scene, it sounds like it could be linked to autumn, so we're sticking with the theme of, seasons and weather. But each one could really be a lot more detailed and could really show the reader what could be in the scene rather than just tell them like they do here. So for each sentence, I would like you to rewrite it. Try to use one of the devices from the right. Actually, you need to use a device in each sentence. And try to use, 4 different ones, one for each sentence. And if you're really trying to be sophisticated, maybe you could use 2 devices in one sentence. And also for the challenge in your sentence, try to make the structure of the sentence more sophisticated. So use some of the techniques you learned last lesson, things like varying the way you begin a sentence, or creating a repetitive structure to make it more complex, or maybe adding in a semicolon or a colon on purpose. Do that. So take some time to rewrite each one, 1, 2, 3, and 4, use a device in each one and make it show the reader about the scene instead of just tell them. So spend a few minutes on that. Okay, so well done for completing those sentences. If you found that a bit difficult, you can always look back at the example that we went through in the last task just to get some ideas. Because although that's describing winter, you can always manipulate some of the words they used in devices and just change it to autumn. So for the last task, the last main task of the lesson, I have a new picture for you, and this links to autumn. So any of the sentences you wrote for the previous task we did where you changed the sentences, you can use those in your description now. So it's kind of building up to you doing this paragraph of writing. So what I'd like you to do is write a paragraph describing the scene in the picture below. This should be a very detailed paragraph. And I split it up into bronze, silver, and gold, just to kind of give you something to aim for in terms of achieving the different grades. So for bronze, write one paragraph describing the trees and the leaves, and focus just on the trees and just the leaves, because it's really good to practice describing one object and focusing on tiny bits of it to build a paragraph around. So vary the way you start your sentences and use at least one example of a simile, alliteration, and then personification. For silver, to push yourself a bit further, write 2 paragraphs. One describing the sky and the weather. Obviously, you may use your imagination. It does look quite gray and cloudy. And then another paragraph describing the trees and leaves. So again, we're trying to follow that structure that you would use in a description where you start with the sky and the weather and then you move down to an object and aspects of that object. For silver, use an example of at least 4 of the devices we've looked at today. You've got them for your Do It Now to look at, so you can tick them off as you go. And vary your sentences for effect. So use some of those techniques that we looked at last lesson. And for gold, write 2 paragraphs. And for that, I will give you the freedom, if you feel very confident, to describe the sky and weather and then the trees and leaves. But if you'd rather describe another aspect, maybe whatever's happening down on the ground here with the benches, or the character, remember, it's not a story you were just describing. There's not going to be a huge event unfolding that this character gets involved in with loads of dialogue. But if you want to branch out and be a bit more creative and go off on your own, or maybe describe the buildings, you can do that. For gold, use all of the devices we have looked at today. Vary your sentences for effect, and can you also weave in a lexical set to push your description further? So spend a good amount of time writing your paragraphs. Go back through the slides if you need any ideas, even revisit the last lesson on sentences, and try to write some very detailed descriptive paragraphs about this scene. So pause the video while you write your paragraphs. Okay, so well done for writing your paragraphs. Hopefully you were able to get them done. I just want you to look back over what you've written, and we're going to go through a checklist in terms of devices and the detail that you've included. So just write a yes or a no for each statement. So number 1, I have described a wide range of details linked to the image and included 5 or more sentences in my paragraph. So like I said last lesson, if you have main paragraphs that are less than 5 sentences, you're going to really struggle to show the examiners that you can be detailed and develop, aspects of the scene that you've chosen to describe. Number 2, I have used a simile or alliteration in my writing. Those are 2 of the easier devices to use, so give yourself a yes if you have done that. Number 3, I have used a range of varied sentences. Not all of my sentences start in the same way, so hopefully you've put a yes for that as well, because you went over last lesson how not to start every sentence with the or it, so hopefully you varied those. Maybe even included a short sentence for effect or a pattern of repetition. Number 4, I have used a metaphor and personification to create deeper meaning in my writing. Give yourself a yes or a no for that. Those are some of the more sophisticated devices that you can use. And then number 5, really linked to our challenges today, I have attempted to weave a lexical set into my writing. So give yourself a yes if you did that, and well done if you did. We'll be going over lexical sets in our future lessons, so don't worry too much if you're not confident with that. Well done, and make sure you send your work for today to your English teacher by email, and we will see you next lesson.